I clutched the cardboard box under my arm, feeling the cheap corrugated edges dig into my skin. My boss, Gregory, still wore that condescending smirk, the one that always set my teeth on edge. Though people in the office were trained to avoid eye contact with me, who wants to empathize with the outcast, after all? I was acutely aware of the hush that had fallen across the aisles of cubicles. I had expected to feel anger, but instead, there was only clarity. "Don't forget to swipe your badge out one last time," Gregory barked. Then, good riddance. He thought he was humiliating me. He had tried to give this exit all the fanfare of a forced firing, throwing his arms up, rolling his eyes, and inviting the HR manager, Paula, to watch as if it were some comedic performance. But he never knew about the resignation letter I'd already prepared, how my name was neatly typed at the bottom in bold confidence, or that I'd long planned to hand it over before he could demean me. I set the envelope on the polished oak table, gave him a small bow, and murmured, "It's all in there," before turning away. Of course, Gregory had no idea that over the last several months I had taken careful steps to protect myself. All he saw was the docile, quiet employee who always stayed late, who rarely tried to hog the spotlight, who minded their own business, at least on the surface. I'd been reorganizing my finances in anticipation of just this scenario, building relationships with higher-level contacts among our clients, never letting on that I was the one truly fueling our biggest projects. And that was just the start of my hidden preparations. The day I left the office, my entire professional life in a single cardboard box, was the same day my personal world cracked. During lunch break, I had received a text from my spouse, Morgan, a single line of casual cruelty. "I'm sorry, but I've realized we're just not compatible. I found someone else who appreciates me more. I'm moving out. Don't bother calling." Hardly eloquent, but effectively brutal. A short, callous blow to the heart that might normally reduce a person to tears. I skimmed the words once, twice, then tucked the phone in my pocket. My colleagues were only a few feet away, Gregory slurping coffee, and Paula fiddling with a pen. I had to keep it together in front of them. Little did Morgan know, I'd already had my suspicions. For weeks, odd phone calls at strange hours, undisclosed trips to visit an old friend, and an inexplicable sense of distance that threatened to freeze me out of my own relationship. So I had quietly prepared. Our savings account, once shared, was now 2 accounts, Morgan's and my own. I had filed certain financial and legal documents to protect my inheritance, even set up a meeting with a mediator, just in case. Still, reading that text struck me somewhere deep, not with shock, but with a cold validation of what I already suspected. But I didn't break down, and I didn't beg. I simply took a deep breath, walked back into the conference room, and handed Gregory the envelope. If one betrayal wasn't enough, I was dealing with 2 that day. Might as well tie them up with a neat little bow. I'd always been the silent type, the one who'd watch from the corner of a room, noticing the details others were too loud to see. My mother often said my strength was in my composure, my calm, analytical mind. "Don't mistake that for weakness," she'd warned me. "It's what will save you when the storm hits." She was right. By the time I left that office, no tears stained my cheeks and no trembling voice escaped my lips. I calmly placed my cardboard box into the trunk of my car, climbed into the driver's seat, and sat for a moment, letting my eyes flick over the phone screen once more. Morgan's text glowed ominously. Rather than reading and rereading, I hit archive and started my car. That message was already part of the past, and so was my life at that company. I had new priorities to consider. At home, I found the apartment half emptied. Morgan had wasted no time. Clothes gone, some of the artwork from the walls missing, a few of the kitchen appliances yanked from cupboards and carried off. Disruptive, yes, but I couldn't help noticing how methodical the removal was. Almost as if Morgan had been planning this spontaneous departure for a while, just like Gregory had planned my humiliating exit. In the evening, I paced around the living room, methodically checking the boxes and drawers. I'd moved any important documents, mortgage statements, investment papers, my severance contract, into a locked cabinet weeks ago. Good thing, too. I noticed Morgan had taken the old filing box containing only outdated documents. Probably wanted to sabotage me, never guessing I had the real documents secured somewhere else. Because I'd suspected something amiss with both my spouse and my workplace, my quiet planning had been extensive. I'd reconnected with my old college friend Veronica, a fiercely talented attorney specializing in contract law and estate planning. We'd been working together on a backup plan for my personal finances for months. Each time Morgan had given me that uneasy feeling, I'd mention it to Veronica, and she'd find another measure to put into place. "It's not paranoia if you're right," she said, winking when I'd once worried I was going overboard. "Besides, it's your future. Protect it." As for the job, I'd already built up a robust professional network. After all, I was the one who truly understood our biggest clients' needs. Jerome Carter, CEO of a global tech firm, was introduced to me by a mutual contact. Over the past year, I'd invested hours of my personal time listening to his vision, designing preliminary plans that would serve his firm's ambitions. Gregory barely glanced at the preliminary analytics, dismissing it as busy work fit for the grunt staff. I knew Carter would eventually realize who the real mastermind was behind the project. In quiet lunches and after-work calls, Carter and I grew to respect each other's professionalism. I politely asked him to keep my name out of any big conversations, but I dropped subtle hints that I was exploring future possibilities. I made no promises. I simply let him see my competence. So by the time I left the company, I was confident that if Carter's firm wanted that specialized project done right, they'd call me directly. I just didn't realize how soon that call would come. Morgan, like Gregory, had always assumed I was helpless. To outsiders, I was nice or harmless, rarely complaining and rarely boastful. Morgan was the dazzling social butterfly, charismatic at parties, always telling jokes, always drawing eyes in any crowd. That charm had enthralled me at first, but over time, I recognized how it masked a need for constant validation. It was no surprise that Morgan's text message showcased that same overconfidence. I found someone else who appreciates me more. I'm moving out. Don't bother calling. In other words, Morgan expected me to fall to pieces, to text back in desperation. Wait, don't go. I'll do anything to fix this. That was the role I was apparently meant to play. The docile, adoring spouse who'd watch with heartbreak as Morgan pranced away into a new life. Even Gregory's pack your things and leave was laced with that same arrogance. In his mind, he was throwing me to the curb. He believed I'd be forced to scramble for a new job while he and the HR manager exchanged smirks about how incompetent I was. He never saw the envelope for what it was, my chosen exit, not his enforced one. But I did exactly as they demanded. I left, quietly and without fanfare. I wasn't about to argue or protest or plead. I let them revel in their false victory, and it wasn't long before their illusions of power began to unravel. Just a week after I left, while I was reorganizing the living room to rid myself of Morgan's presence, tossing old photos, and clearing out an entire closet's worth of memories, I got the call. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. At first, I almost let it go to voicemail, but something nudged me to pick up. Hello? Hi, is this... Oh yes, good. This is Jerome Carter from Carter Tech. I hope you remember me. I couldn't help but let a small grin spread across my face. Of course, Mr. Carter. Good to hear from you. Carter sighed, a mix of relief and exasperation. I just heard from your former company. Gregory made it sound like you left on bad terms, but... Well, let's just say I've come to realize most of the substance behind our project came from you. I specifically requested your input, and they didn't have any of your notes, claimed they weren't in the system. They won't even let me speak to you, which is suspicious, so I found your number in my old records. I'd like to pick up where we left off if you're open to it. Absolutely, I said, my heart thumping in my chest. That's wonderful, Carter continued. I'd like to sign a contract with you personally, either as a consultant or if you have your own company now. If not, I'd be happy to help you establish something on your own. This is a big project, and I trust your vision. He explained the scope of the contract. The number of zeros was impressive, more than I ever dreamed. When I hung up, I felt dizzy with vindication. My old boss had lost not only his star employee, but the biggest contract he'd ever had. He hadn't realized Carter's loyalty wasn't to the company name, but to the person who had the real skill. Too late for Gregory. I almost laughed out loud, imagining Gregory's face when he discovered Carter's new contract would bear my signature at the bottom. Carter himself assured me that he'd informed Gregory of the news. We're not signing with your company anymore. We found a better option, was how Carter had phrased it. No doubt, Gregory was frantically trying to salvage the relationship, blaming incompetent staff or intangible errors. I could see Paula, the HR manager, shaking her head at the meltdown. No longer the confident smirk or mocking laughter, but nervous explanations. There must be some misunderstanding. Yes, a misunderstanding indeed. They had misunderstood me all along. Meanwhile, Morgan's overconfidence unraveled more quietly. Not getting the reaction they expected, my pleas or tears, apparently drove them to try extremes. After leaving the apartment, Morgan posted pictures on social media, photos of a lavish weekend getaway, snapshots with a new partner. Friends in our shared circle texted me with concern, bracing themselves for my meltdown, but I never responded with heartbreak. What Morgan didn't realize was that, in a flurry of rash excitement, they'd put hotel bills and airfare on a joint credit card, one I'd canceled weeks ago. That transaction was flagged, reversed. Morgan would have to pay it out of their own pocket. And the new partner? From what I'd gleaned through mutual acquaintances, that relationship was just as shallow as it looked in the photos. Morgan's so-called bright future was built on illusions. I didn't plan to do a thing to sabotage them. They were doing it all by themselves. A few weeks later, I heard Morgan had been forced to move in with a friend after racking up debt. Word spread that the new partner was financially unstable, so their glamorous lifestyle quickly fell into disarray. My phone never buzzed with an apology from Morgan, but I imagined the regret was brewing. In the meantime, I focused on building my future. Carter introduced me to a venture capitalist who guided me through establishing my own consulting firm. Veronica, my attorney friend, handled the intricacies of drafting the partnership agreement. Within 6 weeks, I found myself standing in a small, sunlit corner office in a building I'd never thought I could afford, signing my very first contract as an independent consultant. Carter's signature sat right beside mine. My daily life transformed. Instead of trudging into Gregory's office at 7:45 a.m. to endure another day of being overlooked and belittled, I greeted sunrise from my own space, a cup of coffee in hand. My phone rang off the hook, not with demands from an ungrateful boss, but with requests from companies who heard about the amazing solutions I developed for Carter Tech. Word of mouth spread quickly. People want to work with someone who delivers results, and apparently, my quiet, strategic approach was in high demand. Financially, I was in a better place than I'd ever been. I paid off my mortgage, replaced the old, threadbare furniture Morgan and I had shared, and retreated to a new, calm oasis I'd made of that apartment. I hired a small team of dedicated, bright individuals, people who reminded me of myself, talented, underestimated folks who just needed a chance. Together, we built something that felt both powerful and right. The best part? My phone had rung one day with a blocked number. When I picked up, it was Paula, the HR manager, her usual smug tone replaced by uncertainty. She mentioned they needed my help clarifying old project details for Carter Tech. Gregory asked if you'd be willing to come in and talk it through, she said stiffly, as though each word cost her effort to utter. We'd pay your consulting fee, of course. I took a measured breath. Leaning back in my new desk chair, Carter had informed me earlier that the old company wanted to salvage any data related to the project. But with the contract canceled and no intellectual property rights secured, they were left in the dust. My rate is fairly high, I told her. That's fine, Paula said hesitantly, swallowing the indignity. We just need the information. Of course. I'll send you an invoice. Once the deposit is received, I'll see if my schedule permits a meeting. There was a long silence, followed by a resigned, thank you, before she hung up. I never did get around to scheduling that appointment. My new clients kept me too busy for old messes, and deep down, I knew Gregory's boat was already sinking. If they decided that I was useless, then they'd have to find another way to handle their crisis. Months passed. My social media was far quieter than Morgan's had ever been. No flashy trips or dramatic posts. Still, people were noticing. A new brand, new clients, a new sense of calm in my face. You look free, an old friend commented when we met for coffee. I felt it too. One morning, on my way to a meeting, I stopped by a local bakery for a quick latte. While standing at the counter, I spotted someone familiar hunched over a corner table, Morgan. They were alone, swirling a cup of tea, eyes puffy and heavy. They looked smaller than I remembered, subdued and burdened. I hadn't seen Morgan since the day they walked out. Instead of approaching, I quietly placed my order. The aroma of freshly baked pastries filled my senses, but I felt that old pang of betrayal. Less sharp now, more like a distant memory. As I turned to leave, Morgan's eyes lifted and caught mine. For a heartbeat, we both stood there, unsure of the next step. Morgan's expression flickered through several emotions: surprise, guilt, and maybe, just maybe, the beginnings of regret. Hey, Morgan said softly. Hi. I offered a polite smile, stepping a little closer. The ring that once signaled our union was missing from Morgan's hand. I wasn't wearing mine either. Months ago, I'd placed it in a small box in my sock drawer, just for closure, I suppose. How have you been? Morgan asked, voice trembling slightly, as if they already knew the answer would contrast with their own fate. The smell of desperation clung to them, an almost imperceptible bitterness in their tone. No more flamboyance or smugness. This was a person at a loss. I've been well, I replied simply. My phone buzzed with a reminder for my upcoming client meeting, my new life literally calling me. Morgan opened their mouth to say something else. Maybe an apology, maybe a request for help. I didn't know, and I didn't need to find out. I'm sorry about everything, Morgan finally whispered, shoulders sagging. I was impulsive. And I held up a hand, shaking my head. It was so strange, seeing someone who once was the center of my home, now reduced to a fleeting encounter in a bakery. It's all in the past, I said gently. I really do hope you're okay. And I meant it. Oddly enough, I felt no malice. Only an odd sense of serenity. Their downfall was their own doing, and I wasn't interested in indulging any further drama. Morgan's eyes darted to the polished shoes I now wore. No doubt they noticed the change in style, the subtle signs of success. I offered a faint wave, then pivoted on my heel, heading out the door as the barista called my name for my latte. It would be another few weeks before I heard the final news about Gregory. Carter, in passing, mentioned, "Your old company isn't doing so well. Gregory was fired after some internal investigations. Seems there were irregularities in how they managed funds and staff. They're trying to reorganize under new leadership. You dodged a bullet there." I thanked him for the update, though I can't say I was surprised. Gregory's arrogance had always been his Achilles heel. The difference was that now I didn't need to be part of his fiasco. From my new vantage point, sipping coffee in my own bright office, I saw how satisfying it was to let the results speak for themselves. Life had changed, for the better. Where once I felt powerless and overshadowed, I now moved through my days with a quiet assurance. No more manipulative bosses yelling about my inadequacies, no more spouse exploiting my kindness. I charted my own course. My consulting firm thrived, and the hush of evening found me reading on a comfortable couch in an apartment that was truly my own space. No ghosts of betrayal lurking in every corner. The memory of Morgan slumped in the bakery and the image of Gregory's frantic desperation for Carter's contract each brought me a particular satisfaction. Not schadenfreude exactly, more a sense of justice. They had both snatched at illusions of superiority, only to watch them slip away. Meanwhile, I realized my most powerful weapon had been my calm foresight and steady resolve. I'd never confronted them with anger or unleashed a dramatic storm of accusations. I protected myself quietly and effectively. And in the end, that composure was the key to my triumph. One crisp autumn afternoon, I concluded a massive deal with a partner in Europe, an alliance Gregory's company would never have been able to handle. As I set down my pen, finalizing yet another lucrative contract, I glanced at the clock. Exactly 5 p.m. The setting sun shimmered across my desk, casting golden rays that felt almost celebratory. It struck me how full circle everything had come. Gregory had shouted that I was useless. He demanded I pack up and leave, cackling to HR. Morgan had sent that cold text message, sure that I'd crumble and plead, but they never understood the quiet determination that had been guiding me all along. Because the next week, our biggest client had indeed called, asking for me personally. And in that moment, I discovered a liberation I didn't know I was capable of. As it turned out, being perceived as useless was just the story they told themselves. The truth was, I was the driving force behind their success. Too late for them to realize that. Too late for all those who underestimated me. Leaning back in my chair, I smiled. Outside the window, the city's lights began to glow. My phone pinged softly with an invitation to a conference in Singapore. My new life beckoned, filled with possibilities. I closed my eyes briefly and thought, yes, I'm finally where I need to be. With that, I gathered my things, not in shame or resignation, but with pride in my accomplishments. I locked up my office, stepping into the crisp evening air. There was nothing left to prove to anyone but myself. And that, I realized, was the sweetest victory of all.